Hello, I'm Wendy Otway, editor of FME, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this morning's webinar. This webinar is brought to you by the Fire Middle East magazine team in partnership with Fireco, the UK's leading manufacturer of wireless hold-open devices for fire doors and the inventor of the internationally recognised and respected Dorgard range. We will be discussing how wireless devices can be used safely, led by Pete Davies. Pete has been with Fireco for almost 10 years and has a keen understanding of relevant guidance and legislation regarding how to use fire doors correctly, and also has an extensive knowledge of Fireco's mass notification systems. Pete will be asking, which is safer, wireless or hardwired, debunking a few wireless myths and examining what the regulations say. Before today's presentations begin, I would ask you to take in the house rules. It is now my pleasure to hand you over to Pete. Good morning, Pete.
Good morning, Wendy. Thank you very much for the introduction there. Right, let me just, there we go. Salam alaikum. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. As Wendy said, my name is Pete Davies and I work for Fireco Limited. For those of you that may be unfamiliar with Fireco, we're a British manufacturer of fire safety products, best known as the inventors of the Dorgard fire door retainer, which we've actually now been making for over 25 years. And last September, we made our 1 millionth Dorgard unit, which was obviously a huge milestone for us as a company. And who am I? I'm Pete Davies, as I say, I'm the business development manager. I'm also a member of the Fire Industry Association Services Council. I've worked with a lot of customers over the last 10 years to help them deal with unruly fire doors and to help them keep their fire doors compliant. During this presentation, we hope to give you an understanding and appreciation of wireless devices, insights into relevant technology and how it's applied, requirements for wireless fire systems, and considerations when choosing between a wireless system and hardwired. So we use wireless technology on a daily basis. Many of you may be using wireless technology to join this webinar. We trust wireless technology to handle our finances, whether it's paying bills via online banking or contactless payments for goods in store. And we use it to navigate around the world or to turn our heating on before we leave the meeting to travel home. We even use wireless technology to charge our phones. Wireless technology is embedded in our everyday life, and there's still a reluctance within the fire industry to use wireless hold open devices. So why don't we trust that technology to hold open fire doors? Well, predominantly hard wiring has been the preferred choice for installations for decades, and it's still seen as many as the only way to get complete compliance with relevant legislation. Hard wiring has been considered more reliable, specifically for critical installations, because of the direct connection or critical pathway between the device on the door and the control and indicating equipment such as a fire alarm panel. For many decision makers, it's a case of, well, we always do it that way. Using that we always do it that way, that's a call to tradition, which makes two assumptions. Firstly, it assumes that the old way of doing things was proven correct when introduced. And also, it assumes that past justifications for the old ways of doing things are still valid. In reality, these two assumptions can be incorrect, as the old way of doing things may have been introduced on incorrect grounds, and past justifications no longer hold up with circumstances such as relevant legislation and technology changing with the times. Advances in technology, specifically radio frequency technology, means that we no longer need to rely on expensive, messy, and time-consuming hard wiring. And why do we bother holding fire doors open at all? Well, the Kick the Wedge survey, which was conducted several years ago by an independent body of over 100 accredited UK fire risk assessors, gives us an idea as to why we want to hold fire doors open correctly. The survey was conducted, as I say, by British fire risk assessors, fire safety officers from the UK's fire and rescue services, all of whom answered fire safety specific questions relating to their observations during fire safety audits. This survey was designed really to evaluate how effective the means of escape were in the UK. And it proved that door wedging is a massive problem. In fact, it showed us that over 64% of properties had wedged open fire doors. And bear in mind, this is on announced visits. This is where customers knew that an inspector or a fire risk assessor was coming into their premises to conduct an audit. So that's a very good reason as to why we want to be looking to hold our fire doors open correctly to avoid that risk of door wedging. And really, there are all kinds of reasons why people might wedge open a fire door, whether it's reasons of accessibility, perhaps they find the fire doors too heavy. Certainly during warmer months in the UK, ventilation is key in a lot of offices, and certainly with the ongoing COVID pandemic, it's been identified that ventilation is a key way to reduce the transmission of COVID-19. It can also help to reduce feelings of isolation in the care sector. It's been proven in various studies that closed bedroom doors in care homes can help lead to feelings of isolation and loneliness. And we also still see a lot of closed door policies, certainly in the UK. Closed door policies are very strict in terms of saying that none of the doors in the building can be held open. But really all that policy does is encourage door wedging. Now, the good news is that door wedging is rarely a malicious attempt to undermine your fire safety strategy. Wedging is almost always due to a lack of awareness of the dangers involved, or for reasons of convenience, or sometimes even both. And obviously, if that fire door is wedged open, then it's not going to do the job that it was very specifically designed to do, which is to stop the spread of smoke and fire in an emergency. So unless we're offering safer alternatives, people will always find what they think are very clever ways of holding doors open, which is really why we bother using hold open devices in the first place. So a quick question for you. When is wedging a fire door illegal? Well, this is one of the few slides where I'm going to read the answer to you verbatim. Article 8 of the Fire Safety Order 2005 requires the responsible person for fire safety to take general precautions to ensure the safety of people using the premises. This includes ensuring that fire doors are closed or are able to close in an emergency. Failure to do this is considered a contravention, and if people are deemed to have been put at risk of death or serious injury in the event of a fire, an offence may have been committed under Article 32 of the Fire Safety Order. Similar requirements are laid out in the Fire Scotland Act and the Fire Precautions Workplace Regulations Northern Ireland 2001 legislation. Obviously, within the Middle East, it's worth checking your own local guidance. This presentation is designed more for a UK audience, so you will have your own specific legislation in your areas. So it's always worth checking those out before you look at any wireless systems. So throughout the presentation, we've included some common myths that we come across regularly when speaking to our customers. The first one is door wedging. Door wedging is okay if it's written into my fire risk assessment. Well, it is permissible to write things like temporary door wedging into your fire risk assessment. It's always advisable on doors where you think that you might need to wedge them open to use some form of automated equipment. Those of you that conduct risk assessments will know that really risk assessments are in place to identify risk. They're not there to condone it. As I said earlier, wedged open fire doors simply aren't going to close in an emergency. And really, you can't rely on the human element to remove wedges if it comes to an evacuation. And frankly, I don't think anyone should have to or be expected to remove door wedges in an emergency, especially when there are so many effective, cost-effective automated options available. So in this next section, we're going to take a look at some of the legal responsibilities and requirements stated in UK guidance for wireless hold open devices. Again, do check local guidance in your area to double check this. I'm more than happy to point you in the right direction if I can. We're going to start with building regulations. So building regulations were first introduced in the UK in the 1960s, and these are prescriptive law, so they have to be complied with. The building regulations give details on various fire safety options, such as things like widths of escape routes and other factors to consider when designing the building from an architectural perspective. There are currently over 15 approved documents, all of which need consideration. And approved document B of the building regulations looks at fire safety and is separated into two volumes, volume 1 for dwellings and volume 2 for non-dwellings. And each document offers guidance for meeting the requirements of building regulations. With regards to holding fire doors open, the document advises the reader to look at the BS 7273 range of standards for guidance on the actuation of systems. Building regs do not give specific guidance on how products should work or where they can be used. And as you can see here, the specific language that the document uses in part 1.38, where any part of BS 7273 applies to actuation of systems, the recommendation of that standard should be followed. So some clear indication here that there is specific guidance that the building regulations want you to take on board when choosing a wireless hold open system. So the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order was made under the Regulatory Reform Act 2001 and actually replaced around 70 pieces of fire safety legislation, such as the Fire Precautions Act 1961 and the Fire Precautions Workplace Regulations, with one simple order covering England and Wales, with Scotland and Northern Ireland having their own similar legislation. The Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order is designed to give a minimum fire safety standard in all non-domestic buildings and introduced a risk-assessed approach to fire safety, which requires a responsible person to carry out certain fire safety duties, such as taking action to prevent fires, protect people against death and injury, ensuring the general fire precautions are satisfactory, and conducting fire risk assessments. To offer further support, the Department of Communities and Local Government, or the DCLC, published a number of guidance documents to assist the responsible person in meeting the relevant responsibilities. The Fire Safety Order guidance, such as the document for residential care properties, recognises that fire doors are hazards and sets out conditions under which they should close, and states that such devices are particularly useful in situations where self-closing doors and escape routes are used regularly by significant numbers of people or by people with impaired mobility who may have difficulty opening the doors. It further states that the automatic device should release, allowing it to close effectively when any of the following conditions occur: the detection of smoke or heat by an automatic detector, the actuation of the fire detection and alarm system by manual means, i.e. a break glass call point, any failure of the fire detection and alarm system, or any electrical failure. So here we have some clear legislation that indicates that hold open devices should be used where door wedging is a risk and gives us some idea as to what conditions the doors should release upon. So as well as the building regulations and the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order, we also have British standards. Now, unlike building regs and the RRFSO, guidance under British standards are not prescriptive law. They simply offer assistance to people who are unfamiliar with fire safety. However, it is always advisable to adhere to these standards wherever possible. Now, BS 5839 is a well-known standard within the British fire industry, and part 1 of this standard looks at the design, installation, commissioning and maintenance of fire alarm systems in non-domestic properties. However, the industry recognised that the document didn't give enough clarity on where certain types of device can be used, specifically wireless devices. As you can see from this slide, like approved document B, Article 9.2 of the standard refers users to the BS 7273 range of standards, which looks more specifically into how devices should operate. Another British standard, BS 5839 Part 3 1988, specifies construction, electrical and performance requirements and methods of testing for automatic release mechanisms for certain fire safety protection equipment. It's normally applied to devices such as electromagnetic hold openers, the most common type of hardwired device used to hold open fire doors. As you can see from the scope of this standard, it does not cover release mechanisms incorporated into closing or opening mechanisms, such as those found in free swing devices, nor does it cover plunger devices like the acoustic products that we see fitted to the bottom of the door. As most wireless hold open products are either free swing or plunger devices, this standard would only be applied to wireless magnetic hold open devices, which are available but are currently far and few between. So this brings us neatly onto BS 7273 Part 4 2015 plus Amendment A1 2021. This is the correct guidance documents for automatic hold open devices. And this is intended for users and specifiers to decide what products are most suitable for their environment. And the most recent edition of this standard, published earlier this year, includes a new amendment which attempts to make it more straightforward and simple to understand. Now, it's important to understand that BS 7273 Part 4 does not recommend which category of system needs to be installed in any given premises. The three system categories it uses need to be regarded as a menu from which purchasers, users, specifiers, enforcing authorities and bodies, insurance or system designers can select a suitable category for any building, deciding what is appropriate based on the findings of the risk assessment and helpful advice from guides like this. Clause 4 of this standard looks specifically at the three categories of actuation, and those categories are critical, standard, and indirect. The standard categorizes products based on the chance of failure within its system, and this is called the critical signal path. Clause 4, Table 1 looks at conditions under which release mechanisms should fail safe. This includes things like power failures, mechanical faults, and in the case of systems actuated by radio signal, loss of communication from the transmitter. And you can see it gives you various options as to what triggers the device to release the door and breaks those down into specific categories: critical, standard, and indirect. Clauses 7 and 8 of this standard look at methods of actuation and mechanisms for unlocking and release of doors, respectively. Clause 7 gives clear guidance on what conditions should cause devices to release the door, such as operation of the fire detection and alarm system or electrical failure, whilst Clause 8 recommends what other standards the mechanism for release should comply with. For example, Clause 8.1.1, any fire detection and fire alarm system on which a release mechanism depends for its correct actuation in the event of fire should conform to BS 5839 Part 1 or BS 5839 Part 6 as appropriate. The latest version of this standard also includes guidance on both acoustic and radio frequency actuated devices in Clauses 15 and Clause 16. But it's Annex B1, Table B1, that gives us the most clear understanding as to where certain types of product can be used. Crucially, where a critical system will be required. As you can see from this excerpt on this slide, the first three examples it offers all require the highest level of compliance, critical. Examples of areas where standard and indirect systems can be used include forming part of the enclosures of a stairway that forms part of a means of escape, other than stairways described in items 2 and 3 and stairways in dwellings, and any fire door in a dwelling other than within the staircase enclosure of a house of multiple occupancy and a flat entrance door in a building containing flats. One interesting point that I hope is addressed in the future is that it's stated in several places throughout the document that in practice, no system can have total reliability and offers advantages and disadvantages for both acoustic and radio frequency wireless systems. Yet the same information is omitted for hardwired devices, which could be misinterpreted as suggesting there are no disadvantages to hardwired systems. As we've already briefly mentioned, hardwired systems has various disadvantages, such as their expensive and time-consuming nature, not to mention issues with remnants or failure of remnant pins. Other relevant standards include BS 9999 2017, which offers guidance for the design, management and use of buildings, providing a best practice framework for fire safety for fire designers and architects. It provides recommendations and guidance on the design, management and use of buildings to achieve acceptable levels of fire safety for people in and around the building. It details ways in which fire safety legislation can be complied with through a more flexible design approach. Where approved document B provides guidance about how building regulations can be satisfied in common building situations, these are not always applicable to more complex, larger buildings. So BS 9999 takes a more holistic view of fire safety, allowing for compensatory measures to offset, for example, travel distances or escape door widths. With regards to hold open devices, it offers this advice. Where practicable, fire doors are in positions where they are not likely to be wedged or propped open. Where this is not practicable, fire doors should be provided with hold open devices on an automatic release mechanism which can be returned to the closed position when required. Again, this is another clear message confirming that wedging is a huge risk and that automatic hold open devices should be used to mitigate that risk. However, the standard does not go on to give any further guidance on how devices should work or where they can be used. Health Technical Memorandum 0502. This defines best fire safety practice for healthcare estates and is also known as the Fire Code, helping to meet the statutory requirements of building regulations in premises like hospitals and care homes. Further guidance comprises a suite of 11 documents, HTM 0503 Part A to Part M, which covers subjects such as fire detection and alarm systems, escape lifts, reducing false alarms, and more. Appendix C in HTMO 502 looks at doors and door sets and recommends that, generally, with a couple of exceptions like fire doors to stairways, all fire doors should be fitted with automatic self-closing devices which comply with BS EN 1154 or BS EN 1634 Part 1, and we'll look at these standards in more detail later on in the presentation. It also recommends that door release mechanisms conform to BS 5839 Part 3 or BS 7273 Part 4. Bearing in mind, as we've already seen, most wireless devices aren't covered by 589 Part 3. You'll be looking more at 7273 Part 4. It also recommends appropriate fail-safe measures for loss of power or faults and advises that fire doors should be released at a predetermined time each night and remain closed throughout sleeping hours. So in our second Mythbuster, we're going to take a look at something that Fireco have addressed very often with customers. Fire risk assessments is just advice. I don't have to action any of the recommended improvements. Well, I mean, it is important that you follow up with the action points or recommendations that are pointed out in your fire risk assessments. Certainly within the UK, if the fire brigade were to come into your premises to conduct a spot check and they identified that you haven't made any attempt to act on any of the recommended improvements to reduce the risk of fire, then they could issue with an enforcement notice, at which point it would be a legal requirement for you to actually follow up on those actions of your risk assessment. So wherever possible, it's always worth making sure that if something is recommended as an improvement in a risk assessment, that it's actioned upon wherever you can. So now we understand a little more about the UK legislative requirements. We're going to have a look and see what sort of devices are actually available. So with regards to hold open devices, wireless hold open devices, there are commonly two types of actuation method for wireless products, and those actuation methods are by acoustic signals or radio frequency signals. Now, when we say an acoustic device, what we mean is a device that will react to an audible signal from a fire alarm sounder, typically emitting at 65 decibels. Some wireless devices can be triggered by other noises at that level, whilst some have better sound filtering technology, which offer a more reliable way of identifying whether the device is hearing a fire alarm sounder or a hoover. Either way, you'll find that most devices are designed to release after a certain time period if they hear a prolonged noise that they can't recognize. This is actually a design feature. This is to avoid any potential danger, kind of a better safe than sorry programming. And as I say, it's a feature of this type of product, not a fault. Devices with sound filtering technology are generally only slightly more expensive than the standard devices, and they offer a more reliable method of actuation. Because they don't release as often, we generally see a much longer battery life in devices with sound filtering technology. There are other devices available which allow you to teach the device what your fire alarm sounders sound like. In theory, this is a great idea, but in reality, it means that every time you fit a new one, you do have to set the fire alarm off. The device has to be in position so that it gets a true understanding of what your fire alarm will sound like. So it's not so taxing when you're installing one or two devices, but if you're installing multiple products, then it can be quite fiddly and very time consuming, let alone, of course, the disturbance that it will create on site for people using your building. Battery life in wireless products can typically range from 6 months to 3 years, depending on various factors, such as how often it releases and what technology it uses. Acoustic devices should fail safe on mechanical fault and power loss. Under BS 7273 Part 4, for example, this makes acoustic devices suitable only for standard and indirect installations. With regards to acoustic technology, you can usually choose between either a door retainer device or a free swing device. Another common myth specifically around acoustic devices and their suitability for bedroom doors. Again, a bit of a misconception here. Certainly when acoustic devices first came to market, there was confusion around where they could and couldn't be used, mainly because there wasn't any guidance or British standards which looked at acoustic actuation. with the publication of BS 7273 Part 4, guidance was finally provided on how Category B at the time, as they were known, how Category B devices could be used, with further amendments in 2015, which gave even clearer recommendations on how Category B or standard hold open devices can be used. So again, check your risk assessment, check the guidance, and just make sure that you're using the right product in this particular sort of situation. So we've looked at acoustic actuation. The other method that we're going to look at today is radio actuation. Hardwired devices have been deemed more compliant than wireless acoustic devices because of the direct connection between the control and indicating equipment, or the fire alarm panel, and the devices on the door themselves. With developments in radio technology, it is now possible to achieve the highest level of compliance with radio actuated devices. For example, radio frequency systems use a hardwired radio transmitter, which is wired directly into the fire alarm panel itself. That way, if the fire alarm is triggered, or if the fire alarm panel receives a fault signal, then the radio transmitter can ensure that all the fire doors release safely, just like a hardwired system. It also means that devices can't be triggered by any background noise. False activations aren't an issue with radio systems, as they will only release once they've received a radio signal from the fire alarm panel. Unlike acoustic devices, they're not constantly listening for a fire alarm or other sounds which could trigger them. Also, battery life on radio devices increases life expectancy dramatically, because the device isn't constantly listening out for a fire signal like an acoustic device would. Radio devices, as I say, simply sit and wait for instructions from the radio transmitter. So if you do need that extra level of compliance or work in a noisy environment, but you still want a wireless system, a radio system would be a better suited option for you. And just like hardwired systems, radio systems can offer further integration with other building management systems for other functionalities, such as lockdown applications or security features. For example, excuse me, for example, you could have a radio transmitter release fire door retainers on a signal from an access control system to help with a lockdown procedure. If you're going to fit a retrofit lockdown application, it's a really easy option to look for. So there are really lots of different ways radio systems can be integrated with other building management systems that you might be using on site. So another common misconception with hold open devices fitted to the bottom of the door: hold open devices can warp my fire doors. Well, according to BS 5839 Part 1, you should be testing your fire alarms on a weekly basis, and automatic hold open devices, including acoustic devices, should be tested as part of this weekly routine. Now, that weekly release is enough to alleviate any tension that can build up to cause fire door warping. So as long as your weekly fire alarm test is conducted, you should avoid any door warping issues. So we're going to have a look at some considerations now and look at what to look for in a wireless hold open device. First of all, we're going to look at whether or not you should be using a free swing device or a fire door retainer, because there are benefits for each. Now, I think we can all agree that fire doors are one of the most important pieces of passive fire safety protection that we use in our buildings. As we've already discussed, they're designed specifically to prevent the spread of smoke and fire in an emergency. But again, I think we can all agree that fire doors can be very, very heavy, and they're responsible for a lot of injuries for people with mobility issues, and can even be a barrier rather than a piece of protection. So free swing devices are ideal for this. Free swing devices are perfect for heavy fire doors because they make them feel much lighter and easy to use by removing all of the weight and resistance that you would usually expect from a fire door when going through one. And free swing devices also allow doors to be left open in any position. So they're great for bedroom doors and flat entry doors where residents would generally struggle to actually get into their accommodation. Door retainers, on the other hand, will just keep the door open in a fixed position. Most commonly for wireless products, these types of devices are plunger devices, which use friction to hold the door open. However, there are some wireless magnetic hold open devices available. So if you need less movement on the door or less functionality from it, and you just want the door held open in a fixed static position, then door retainers may be better suited for you. So here is a common example of where a free swing device may be more practical than a door retainer. This is something some of you may have seen already, and it's something that Fireco unfortunately see all too often. This is something that we do see more in care homes and social housing, where this is becoming a major issue. One customer told me recently that in a survey of 6,000
Pete, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you've muted yourself. We lost you about 30 seconds ago.
Very, very sorry. There we go. Is that better?
It is.
Excellent.
I think you perhaps can go back to that, just back onto this last screen.
So as I say, this photograph here, this is a sort of situation where you'd be looking at using a free swing device or a fire door retainer, and this is symptomatic of someone struggling with a heavy fire door. So one of the biggest considerations you're going to want to look at is whether or not the device has been tested properly. And this is one of the key considerations when choosing any product, ensuring that it has the appropriate third-party testing. So where standards like BS 7273 Part 4 are guidance notes, the BSEN range of standards are specific product standards that devices must conform to in terms of performance requirements. And this standard really looks at how devices should be tested. So BSEN 1155, we mentioned this briefly earlier. This is the testing standard for electrically powered hold open devices for swing doors. So hold open devices should be tested to BSEN 1155. This product standard gives manufacturers an understanding of what requirements the product needs and how it should be tested, giving the product its CE mark. Testing looks at mechanical reliability, and it looks at how many cycles the device can operate on before it starts having problems. So 50,000 cycles, for example, is the open set close requirement for our hold open devices. And at Fireco, we actually put our products through 20% more testing than we're required to. Very often, because we use wireless technology, customers want to see that we've gone above and beyond in our testing. So this testing also looks at whether the device can handle the weight of the door that it's been fitted to, and whether the unit will release once the battery life depletes within a specified time, making sure that the fail-safe mechanisms should work as required. The standard then classifies products with a 6-digit code, with each digit relating to a particular feature of the product, which is measured against the performance requirements of the standard. And we'll take a look at an example here. So the first digit you see in this code, this represents category of use. In this example, the product is grade 3, which is for doors for use by the public. This is the only grade identified for electrically powered hold open devices. The second digit indicates the number of test cycles. Grade 5 is for 50,000 cycles. You may also see another grade, which is grade 8, which has a minimum of 500,000 cycles. So the third digit identifies here identifies the door mass of the test door, or the power size as it's sometimes referred to. So table 1 of EN 1155 identifies 5 different grades. In the example you can see on this slide, the product is suitable for power size 3 fire doors, which are roughly around 60 kilos. So the fourth digit here in the code indicates fire resistance. And this is another easy one to identify, as there is only one grade of fire resistance in this standard, which is grade 1. And that means it's suitable for use on fire or smoke door assemblies, subject to satisfactory assessment of the contribution of the electrically powered open device. The fifth digit we see here represents safety, and it's another single grade, grade 1. This is the only grade available for electrically powered hold open devices, and it's a requirement for this standard to satisfy that the product is safe to use. Therefore, only one grade is identified. And the final sixth digit represents corrosion resistance in accordance with EN 1670, with one of 5 possible grades being allocated. Grade 0 means that there is no defined corrosion resistance. Other testing you might want to look out for is BS EN 1634 Part 1, and this standard is to test for fire resistance on door sets. So this is where a complete pre-manufactured door set will be fitted and assembled and set on fire. So this includes all the relevant architectural ironmongery, the hinges, door handles, kick plates, and any hold open devices that are being tested as part of the fire door set. And this standard is really designed to time when fire actually breaches through the door. If the door fails to meet the resistance times it should have, then the product has had a negative impact on the door's performance. So this is really important in terms of understanding that the products that you're using aren't going to allow fire to travel any faster through the fire door than they would normally. So the primary test evidence is really there to ensure the responsible person that everything on the fire door itself is made compliant. And so in the UK, for example, a note was sent out recently to landlords and building owners asking them to look specifically at flat entrance doors to make sure that test evidence has been completed to meet the performance requirements under building regulations. So again, this is a really useful testing standard to look out for, because it effectively means that you've got peace of mind knowing that, as I say, that the products that you're using aren't going to in any way damage the integrity of your fire doors. So we'll have a quick look at some benefits and pitfalls of going wireless. There are benefits and pitfalls to each, just the same as there are with hardwired products. Although I would say that the benefits outweigh the pitfalls. Certainly reduced installation costs. Wireless products are easier and quicker to install, so installation costs are massively reduced. Wireless products also offer less disruption. There's no need to be putting holes through walls to carry cabling. There's no need to have drills going off all day as you're doing it. They're very, very quickly installed, so it really disrupts people using your building a lot less than hardwired. Wireless products also reduce the risk of disturbing any asbestos that might be present in your building. Certainly in the UK, we still have a very high level number of buildings with asbestos in them. So again, by eliminating the need to drill holes through your walls, we therefore eliminate the risk of disturbing that asbestos. And also you don't need to worry about poorly sealed penetrations through things like compartmentation walls. Again, by reducing the amount of holes you need to put through walls in the first place, you're reducing the amount of issues that can be raised from those holes not being filled in and fire sealed properly. Wireless products also mean you're not going to have to redecorate once all the hard wiring work is complete. So again, there's further cost savings there. And they can be used and moved around the building. So if the layout of the building changes, you can simply remove the products from the doors and fit them to another. Also, wireless devices aren't affected by power cuts and can be used as a cost-effective temporary solution. But generally, as I say, they're much, much easier to install, and some wireless products can be fitted to your fire door within minutes. So as with any technology, there can be some pitfalls to wireless devices. Battery changes, for example, can be an issue, especially if you're having to change batteries often. Acoustic devices in particular can have short battery lives if they're frequently triggered by ambient or background noises. Acoustic devices also have to constantly listen for a fire alarm, which consumes much of the battery power. So in devices which are actuated by a radio frequency signal, battery life can be much, much longer, in some cases up to 5 years, as the devices simply sit and wait for a signal from the transmitter, which is hardwired to the alarm. And because they can't be actuated by any background noise, they're prone to fewer false activations. Some devices do use bespoke battery packs that can only be purchased from the manufacturer, although I would suggest that the cost of purchasing batteries for wireless devices would be offset by the savings you'd make by not having a hardwired device using your mains power constantly. So it's important to keep note of who's installed these devices and where batteries should be purchased from. Really key piece of advice there, I think. Make a note of who's installed the device and keep an eye on where you're purchasing batteries from. Some people within the industry do still view wireless products as voodoo, so you may be required to offer further evidence that the product is suitable. And of course, you should always be prepared to speak with the manufacturers in those instances. Any manufacturer that's making wireless fire safety products should be able to offer the correct evidence to support their product. Radio actuated devices as well, they tend to be closed protocol, so you can't mix and match manufacturers. So for example, if you started to use Fireco's range of radio products, you'd have to continue to do so through all the doors that you want to fit them on. Whereas with some hardwired devices, you can mix and match products and different manufacturers. And who should be using wireless devices? Well, really anyone that feels wireless products are suitable and safe for their premises. Certainly anyone that's had enough of endless drilling and lengthy cleanups, which are synonymous with hard wiring. Really, I think anyone can benefit from wireless devices, whether it's financial teams benefiting from cost savings, whether it's the installers benefiting from a quicker turnaround, or occupiers benefiting from quicker installations. I think anyone that feels, as I say, that wireless products are suitable and safe for their premises should use them. And this brings us on to our final mythbuster for today. Wireless devices are only suitable for retrofit. Well, the applications for wireless retrofit installations are wide and varied, but a lot of people assume that because you have cables going in for everything else at the new build stage, then it's really of no financial consequence whether you hardwire or hold open, whether you hardwire or use wireless devices, but it's not necessarily true. Wire-free devices can still offer cost savings on new builds, but also a lot of the time we see architects and consultants looking to use wireless technology because it's just easier to get on with. So really I would suggest that wireless devices are just as suitable and just as feasible to be used on new builds as they are for retrofit applications. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. Hopefully I've demonstrated to you that we no longer need to hardwire all of our critical installations for fire doors. There are radio products on the market that will give you exactly the same level of compliance as hardwired systems. We've shown you that a wide range of devices are available, as well as the guidance on statutory requirements to identify what type of product is best for each individual door you're looking at. And remember, compliance as a critical installation can be achieved with radio frequency devices, providing they fail safe on a fault indication from the fire alarm system. And we've looked at the various benefits of going wireless and what you need to do when considering using these types of products. And the basic message from that should be always risk assess and always use those risk assessments as a guide to helping you identify what your requirements really are and how you should action them to reach compliance. Thank you very much for your time today. That's the end of the presentation. I appreciate you all joining us. Back to Wendy.
Thank you very much, Pete. I certainly found your presentation very informative and thought-provoking. Earlier, we asked you, have you used wireless products in the past? 50% of you participating said yes, thus 50% of you said no. We will now have a Q&A session for 10 to 15 minutes. Please submit your questions by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. But in the first instance, Pete, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
Do you manufacture your products in the UK?
We do, yes. A lot of people assume that because we're a British manufacturer, we have them built overseas and shipped over. But we actually manufacture everything in our UK headquarters on the south coast of England. Our production team, a lot of our production team have been with the company since it was formed in the mid-90s. So they've got collectively over 400 years of experience building our products. And this is really useful for us because it means if we develop something new or if we want to change something, we can do it very, very quickly. It also means that we can hold a lot of stock. So if customers need things urgently, we can usually get them sent out fairly quickly.
And in this current climate, of course, having manufacturing under the same roof means you're not having distribution problems either, I presume.
Absolutely, no. In fact, the COVID pandemic has proven to be quite an interesting time for Fireco as customers look at ways that they can reduce surface contacts with things like door handles. Our products have been very well received in that arena, so we've had a lot of success with Dorgard over the last year because it's something that people have had a real benefit for.
I think this might be a question you're often asked. What should I do if my door guard is beeping?
So Dorgard is programmed to emit a series of beeps which indicate a fault, and it will emit a different series of beeps depending on what the fault is. There are some YouTube guides which you can search up under Fireco. If you look at our YouTube channel, there's some videos on there which can break down what those beeps mean. But I think the simplest thing to do is, if you're ever in doubt, is to call us. We've got a customer support team who are there to answer any questions you've got, to translate those beeps into a language that you can understand. So if you're ever in doubt, just call our customer support team.
Great. So do you offer your products to the education sector, in particular in the Middle East?
We offer our products to all sectors. Certainly within the UK, the education sector is one of our biggest markets. So if there is a specific requirement that someone has, it's certainly something we can look at. We have some distributors in the Middle East. I think we might even be able to put you in contact with them. So if there's a requirement there, let us know and we can take a look at it for you.
Brilliant. I hope that responds satisfactory to your question, but do send an email if you want to know more. So, all being equal with COVID, will Fireco be attending Intersec in Dubai in January 2022?
I would imagine so. We were at the last event, and I think we're planning to go to the next one. I think it'll probably be some of my colleagues rather than myself. They tend not to let me travel abroad, so it'll probably be two of my lucky colleagues that get to go. But yeah, I should imagine we'll have a presence there.
We're also being asked whether FME will be there. Yes, FME, as long as we are able to travel and all is safe and well and risk assessed to our benefit, then we will certainly be there too. We always have been. Do you have an operational office in Istanbul, Turkey?
We don't have an operational office in Istanbul, Turkey, but again, if there is an inquiry or a requirement that you would like us to look at, you can contact us. If we can't supply it to you, we'll find a contractor nearby that can.
Brilliant. So, do wireless devices react slower than hardwired?
Well, technically yes and no. So under guidance, we meet all the requirements that wireless hold open devices need to meet in terms of the reaction time from the fire alarm being triggered to the door actually releasing and closing. I think, for example, on our bog standard Dorgard products, it's about 20 seconds from the fire alarm being triggered to the door closing. And actually there's a benefit to this because it means that we can actually warn people that the door is about to close. With a lot of hardwired devices, as soon as the fire alarm is triggered, the power to the device is cut and the door closes with no fanfare, no announcement, and that can lead to serious injury. In a couple of extreme cases, it's cost people their lives as well, where they've been hit on the head. So our products will react a little bit slower than hardwired devices, but all within sort of the remit of the relevant standards. And as I say, we use that time to actually give people an effective warning that they need to move out of the way before the door hits them.
So, can you use rechargeable batteries?
We recommend not using rechargeable batteries for the key point that they just don't hold a charge long enough. The disposable batteries that our products use are widely available as well. So you can get them pretty much in any convenience store. But no, we wouldn't recommend using rechargeables.
Now, we have been asked a question which I'm not sure has got all the information in it for you to answer, but let's go for it. How close should the device be located from the production line? Sideways or above the production line? Do you produce a door guard that would cut a production line in half or something?
I'm not sure what the question's getting at. I mean, certainly in terms of positioning on the door guard would go at the bottom of the door, and our free swing device would go at the top of the door. Perhaps there was some confusion with production line and product. I'm not sure,
right.
but perhaps if the person asking that question could clarify, then we can take another look at it.
Okay. And one final question this morning. How can you use fire doors in hazardous zone 2C areas with automation?
That question sounds like a question that's outside of my expertise. I have to be honest and say that I don't recognise the terminology that's been used there. I'm happy to take away that question and look at it and try and provide an answer. But in terms of giving you an answer at the moment, as I say, I'm afraid the terminology in that question is not making a huge amount of sense to me. So perhaps if we could look at that again as well.
Fair enough. Thank you, Pete. So, unless we have any more questions to hand, I'd like to thank you very much for your very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of our participants today. We will be reaching out to you in due course to see if you have any more questions that still need answering. And of course, if you have further questions, do visit the Fireco website, fireco.uk, and also their distributor in the UAE, Kentech. Of course, the FME website, which is a comprehensive source of information, is also a good place to visit to get news and views, as well, of course, a billboard for the next webinar. So from me, goodbye, and thank you, Pete.
Thank you.
And from all of the FME team, stay safe and well.